Alright guys, how's it going? My name is Jacob Flowers and welcome to Flowers Films, the best videography channel on YouTube, on planet Earth. This is the first of many videos where I'm going to be documenting my journey in filmmaking so far. This channel is going to be dedicated to beginners who are basically wanting to learn some tips and tricks. And yeah, just like all the other videography channels out there on YouTube at the minute, I'm basically just copying them all. But the difference is, I'm actually entertaining. The difference is basically to me and all the other videography channels out there, tutorials, there's loads, is the fact that I'm still learning and it's going to be really practical, good advice. So make sure, you know, if you want to get into professional videography or you just want to make YouTube videos look better or you're just interested in general in my life because it is so exciting, then tune in. I'm going to upload videos every fortnight based around how to make your videos better. And yeah, just all round have a great time and some good top banter. So let's begin, shall we? Now, there'll be no better place to start my channel, my videography channel, than basically telling you what camera I use and recommending on what camera you should buy. Some of you might have a cheap camera, some of you might not have a camera at all. Some of you, your mummy and daddy, have probably given you a £2,000 camera that you don't know how to use. Whichever the case, this video is going to basically overview, in my opinion, what to look for when you first buy your camera, a broad overview, what camera I've got and a review of the one I've got and how I use it, and also my overall opinion on cameras as a whole. So make sure to stay tuned. If you're interested, make sure to subscribe, like and share this video with your friends if you're looking into getting a camera for using for professional use or just for YouTube videos. Tell them to watch this video because I'm basically going to give a broad overview on what you should look for when buying a camera. Don't listen to all the salespeople at Currys and PC World because they're going to try and rip you off, okay? They're going to try and rip you off. You need to avoid that. You need to watch this video before you go to Currys and PC World, guys, to get your first camera. Trust me. Don't fall for it, okay? Pete over there, on commission, he'll be telling you, oh no, you better not get this one because there's one over here and it's an extra, I know it's only an extra £1,000, but you're going to get a lot more use out of it. No, you're not! It's a lie. Don't fall for it. Watch this video first. So buying your first camera, it can be confusing. Where do I start? You're out in the wilderness. You don't know what a camera is. You don't know how to work a camera. Maybe you do. I don't know. There's so many things to factor in. They're all different shapes and sizes. What on earth? Where on earth do I start? Well, don't worry guys, I've got you covered. I'm going to run you through everything that you need to know and check out before you buy your first camera. This is going to be a broad overview, so obviously you're going to want to do a bit more research after you finish this video, but I think it's a good start. Watch this video first and then go out and do your own research and decide for yourself. It's just my opinion, but I think it's a very good opinion. Just tune in. So I'm going to talk you through number one, which is the best brand, what specs you should look for in a camera, and other confusing elements like all the things that the sales representatives at Currys and PC World are going to try and say, like, oh my god, this camera's got 42 megapixels. Doesn't matter. Listen to me. Number one, which brand is the best? There's loads of different brands out there, like, you know, your clothing brands, your Gucci, your Primark. Obviously Primark's the best. This is a Primark special. Same with cameras, there's a lot of different brands, but which one is the best? Now, for video, there are three main camera brands in my opinion. There's others, there's Nikon, you know, Fujifilm, all the other things. But Canon, Sony, and Panasonic, they're the three ones you should look out for video. Now, if you're going into photography, you know, Olympus and Nikon, they do great photography cameras as well, but in my opinion, for video, I'd say these three brands are the top ones you need to look out for. But you know, each to their own. But what are the differences between these brands, Jacob, you say? Well, let me tell you. So number one is colour. Some people prefer the colours of another brand of camera, as each camera has got a different look or colour profile to be specific. Some say Canon's colours are the best, others Sony, but ultimately the colour can be significantly altered in post, so this isn't really a significant factor to, you know, you might hear about it online, oh, Canon's got a better colour profile than Sony, Sony's got a better colour profile than Canon. It doesn't really matter, guys. But what I would advise is if you buy in 2 cameras or you plan to get another camera down the line, make sure to stick to the same brand. Yeah, I would advise once you get a camera brand, make sure if you're filming a wedding you need 2 cameras or whatever, or a podcast, use the same camera, guys. It will save you hassle in post-production. Number 2, usability. So this is the thing you've got to take into consideration. It's the look and feel of the camera. Now, each camera brand has their own menus and buttons and feel, a bit like the difference between a PS4 and an Xbox. They both do the same thing in a slightly different way. I've only had the pleasure of using a Canon and a Panasonic camera, so I haven't used a Sony camera. In my opinion, out of them two, the Canon is an overall easier camera to use, for a beginner especially. The menus are a lot clearer. The settings and the buttons, there's just a lot more options, so I would go with the Canon if you're a beginner. That's my personal opinion. I've not got the chance to use a Sony, but Sonys are usually mirrorless cameras, so they're a bit smaller, they're a bit more fiddly, and Canon just seems a lot more sturdier. So if you're a beginner and looking into your first camera, I'd say for usability, then Canon wins that one. But at the end of the day, you get used to the camera that you're using. So if you get a PS4, you get used to a PS4 controller. It's the same thing, just do your research. So that's why it's only a 2.5, doesn't really matter. Number 3 is focus, and I'm giving that a factor rating of 3. So each camera has different focus modes and speed in which the camera focuses as well. It's got auto tracking and all sorts, so it can track the focus when someone's moving. As a professional, you will most likely use manual focus. I'm using manual focus now, but if you're a beginner just starting out, especially if you're doing photography and a bit of video, you might want to rely on autofocus just to start out with, because it's one extra thing to think about when you're learning how to move the camera and things. It's not reliable autofocus, and that's the thing, but I'd say that for the budget cameras, I think Canon's got the best autofocus. But again, do your research. That's something you definitely need to look out for. What are the different autofocus modes and how good is it at autofocusing? Now, the next topic I'm going to move on to is what type of camera should I get? Number 1, mirrorless or DSLR. Now, these are 2 variations of cameras. DSLR is like the OG of cameras. It's like the ones that are the most popular. Mirrorless is something that's new and that's just come out on the scene over the past few years, and it's sort of exploded and overtaking DSLR. But basically, they're both the same thing. They're both cameras at the end of the day. They both work the same way. There's just a few differences, and I'm going to talk you through them now. So basically, most mirrorless cameras offer 4K standard shooting, whereas DSLRs don't. Although 4K is fantastic, it's not necessarily essential. By all means, you don't need it. I don't use 4K. And also as well, when you're just starting out as a beginner and you might not have a very good laptop, 4K footage takes up a lot of memory and a lot of processing power. So in my opinion, I would stick to 1080p Full HD, which is basically, I'm filming on 1080p now and it looks good. Obviously 4K is amazing, but you don't need it when you're first starting out, so that's not much of a factor in my opinion. Mirrorless cameras also do tend to be more expensive on the budget scale of things. You can pick up a cheap DSLR fairly a good price, whereas mirrorless cameras probably start at around, you know, £800 to £1,000. You can pick up a DSLR cheaper than that, but they have got a bigger sensor, which basically means it lets in more light. And a lot of people do prefer mirrorless cameras. They're catching up to DSLRs, and they are good cameras. But in my opinion, you're best sticking to a DSLR when you're first starting out, just to get your head around everything. They're a lot more simpler to. They're just a lot cheaper and a lot easier to get your hands on, so I'd probably stick to a DSLR for now. You don't need to worry about the differences as of yet, but if you want to do a bit more research, it's basically how the camera lets in light and things like that, so yeah, check that out if you want to. Number 2, full frame or crop sensor. A full frame sensor is 35mm, which is traditionally what they used to shoot films on. It's basically the standard, a full frame sensor. The camera I'm shooting on now is a crop sensor, so full frame has a better depth of field, better in low light, and has a better ISO performance, which does make some difference, don't get me wrong, but crop sensors do have their advantages. For example, they provide greater focal length, so the length in which you can reach with your lens, essentially. So because the sensor's cropped, your image is also cropped. I'm using a 50mm lens on this camera right now, for example. If I were to use that on a full frame sensor, it would be 50mm, but because it's on a crop sensor, it would be maybe 60 to 70mm, so you can get closer in, and some people prefer that. Full frame sensors tend to be more expensive because they are arguably better as well. But if you're a beginner starting out, there's a lot of great crop sensor cameras out there, so I'd advise you would stick with crop sensor. But if you've got the budget to go full frame, by all means, go full frame. Number 3, specifications. Now this is the nitty gritty. The first thing on the specifications would be image quality and slow motion. In that comes image stabilization, and what image stabilization basically is that it keeps your camera more stable in a nutshell. If you're looking at a camera at Currys or whatever or online and it says it's got image stabilization, it means when you hold your camera it'll be less shaky, so it's always a good thing. If the camera you have doesn't have image stabilization, for example the camera body I'm using, which is a Canon 700D, doesn't have it built in, you can get lenses that have image stabilization. So I'd recommend either getting a camera that has image stabilization or a lens. If you don't have any image stabilization, it's not very good. If you want to get them like use the camera on the go, which you will be doing a lot of, instead of putting it on a tripod, you're going to want a bit of image stabilization. So look out for that. That's something that you will need. If not on the camera body, if that's not on your budget, definitely on the lens you're using. It's a very good thing to have. Second thing is, do I need 4K? I've already talked about this. No, you don't. Just full 1080p HD. Megapixels as well. That's not really a great factor. For example, the megapixels in this iPhone could be more than DSLR megapixels, but DSLR's got a way bigger sensor, so ultimately DSLR is going to take a way better picture than an iPhone. So you can ignore megapixels in my opinion, but you do want to pay attention to frames per second. You really want the camera that you're buying to shoot 60 frames per second. Most cameras do. Some cameras, like mine for example, shoot 60 frames per second, which basically means you can do slow motion, but it drops the quality down to 720p, which isn't ideal, but there's not much of a notable difference. If you can get a camera that shoots 60 frames per second at 1080p HD, go for that one. Number 2, lens variation. You can't put any lens on a camera body. For example, I couldn't get a Sony and put a Canon lens on it without an adapter. So you need to get a camera that has got a range of different lenses, a range of different cheap lenses if you're looking on a budget. For example, Sony, they're going to be expensive, the lenses on Sony. So in my opinion, stick to Canon or Panasonic there. They've just got a better lens variation, especially Canon. A lot of lenses you can use. For example, on my Canon here, I'm using a Sigma lens. You couldn't put a Sigma lens on a Sony without an adapter. So it's just something to look out for. You want to invest in a good piece of glass, i.e. a lens, when you first buy your camera. When you buy your first camera, you will get a stock lens, a lens that comes with it. They're okay, but in my opinion, you want to upgrade your lens straight away. That's the first thing you want to do. I'm using a Sigma 17-50, I believe, which is a good lens. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to check that out. Affordable, and it's a great piece of glass, so definitely check it out. But yeah, just do your research and make sure you get a good quality lens. Overall, it can be a bit mind-boggling. There's a lot of things to consider when you're buying your first camera, but if you're used to using your camera for recreation, or you want to get started and you want to be a professional videographer, if your camera shoots 1080p full HD and it works and you can hold it and you understand what it does, it's fine. Just go with it, don't overthink it. You can think about these things in the future. Just pick up a camera, start shooting, start learning. Yes, there's a lot of things you need to consider and there's a lot of specs, but you can get bogged down with all that stuff. It doesn't matter. Every camera's the same. They all shoot video. They all do the same thing. So yeah, just get out there and start recording and learning. If you want to know what camera I've got, I'll leave a link in the description. It's a Canon 700D. You can pick one up for around £300, £400. If I were you though, I'd recommend probably getting a Canon 70D or 80D. They've just got a better autofocus system if you're just starting out and you've got the budget. But the overall point of this video basically is, I hope I've given you a good starting point if you're looking to buy your first camera, of things to look out for so you can go and do your own research. And basically, I want to get the point across that it doesn't matter what camera you use, it's how you use it and the information you know. You can have a budget camera and still get amazing video and amazing quality images if you put the work in, you know what you're doing with the camera. Forget about 4K, forget about ultra slow motion, forget about megapixels and all this stuff. Just start shooting with a budget camera and it can, open up a lot of doors for you, and you can upgrade in the future. Don't get bogged down in the specifics, basically, is the message of this video. Anyway guys, if you like this video, make sure to subscribe, make sure to give it a like and share with your friends. I'm going to be uploading every fortnight, just video tips and tricks, and yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this one. I'm going to do loads of different tutorials, so make sure to subscribe guys, and this has been Jacob Flowers with Flowers Films. I will see you in the next one.